Should Ohio State leave the Big Ten? Find out next on episode 2 of Dotting the I with Davis and Chad. What's up, Buckeye Nation, and welcome to the second episode of Dotting the I with Davis and Chad. Let me tell you something. We have had one uneventful and depressing week as far as Big Ten football goes. Absolutely nothing that has happened this week has done anything to either bring us closer to an answer as to why we're not having college football or bring us closer to an answer of when we're going to have college football.
My sentiments exactly, because as someone that is continuing to just wait for some sort of response. I mean, not even over the last week, over the last month plus, because that's been the big downfall of the Big Ten is they won't tell us anything. I mean, we're getting rumors and we're having to try to read these articles where people are saying, oh, I got someone on the inside that's saying this and saying that. I mean, I've been waiting for a revote for like 2 weeks and we still can't get any definitive information. So I would call this week a complete failure, barring the fact that they would just come out and say that, hey, it's done for good and there is no revote.
And that's the biggest thing. Why does no one associated with the Big Ten or like some kind of a secret cult, like, oh, we can't let anybody in the public know what's going on. We can't even let them know if there's actually going to be a vote. You know, everything that we've read and that we've heard, you know, that they're going to vote Sunday or Monday and that they're, you know, probably meeting this weekend and all that is just hearsay. No one has confirmed that.
Well, I mean, again, that's just the problem. Like, this is just such a failure on the Big Ten's part. And the thing that I feel like gets overlooked, or at least not in our area, but overlooked maybe as a nation as a whole, is that this is just really penalizing Ohio State more than it's penalizing anyone else. Everyone else is probably not as hard up for answers, or it's not as critical. I mean, it's barring, yes, you have Nebraska and you have Iowa that's really trying to, you know, kind of push more for, you know, what's going on, we want to play, but really they don't have as much to lose as Ohio State does. Ohio State has the most to lose out of this whole situation, and that right there is infuriating.
So I guess that kind of brings us to the topic today that we wanted to really get to on this podcast, which is, you know, should Ohio State leave the Big Ten? You know, I've seen, you know, a lot of people talking about it on Facebook and other social media, and we thought, you know what, that'd be probably a good topic for us to address.
Well, I went ahead and decided to poll Twitter. Now, of course, we understand Twitter is not necessarily your most informed people. Sometimes people are just quick to react or click a button.
What are you trying to say? I got Twitter.
Well, that proves my point. Thank you. So basically, though, I decided to make a poll mainly because I know how I feel. I know how Chad feels. I might know how 3 or 4 people feel. I need to know maybe more on a wide scale, kind of how people feel. Now, given these numbers are not going to be exactly a true, you know, result of maybe what Ohio State feels like or what the Big Ten feels like or what other people outside of the Big Ten feels like. But ultimately, this is a Buckeye show, and our opinion matters to us, so screw everyone else. Regardless, the poll was basically, should Ohio State stay in the Big Ten? And a little shameless plug here, please follow our Twitter account at Dotting the I with Davis and Chad. So the poll, the results ended up being pretty surprising, I actually think, because I would assume the majority of the people, especially that are going to poll this on Twitter, are people that are searching things like Ohio State and football and Big Ten. We ended up having a pretty weird result where for staying in the Big Ten, 23% of people thought we should stay. Less than a quarter figured that we should stay in the Big Ten. And we had, instead of it just being stay or leave, I also put not just on top of leave, but should we leave and join a different conference? Or should we actually leave and go independent like Notre Dame? Okay, and we'll explain the reasoning why we thought maybe independent might be an option. So 23% said stay in the Big Ten, 47% said leave and join a different conference, and 30% said leave and go independent. So that ended up being a total of 77% of our polling audience said leave the Big Ten. Now, I'm no like mastermind or brainiac, but it doesn't take a lot to figure out that if you have over 0.75% of people that are kind of feeling one way, that's a pretty big majority. I mean, hell, it takes less than that to cancel the Big Ten football season.
At first I was kind of shocked. At first I was shocked when I saw the numbers. I said, wow, I can't believe this many people are thinking that way. But then, you know, right now we're irrational. Our emotions have been played with. First, we had to deal with the fact that, we were having an abbreviated season. Then we're dealing with the fact that we have no football. Now there might be football, but we don't know. Ohio State fans are getting thrown all over the place emotionally. And I really think that that's why those results are coming in the way that they are.
I mean, absolutely. It's definitely, we're at a breaking point. And I think the breaking point now may never be fixed, because I think even if they vote to reinstate the season and Ohio State is allowed to play and even compete for a national title and be included in the college football playoff, the damage is done. And it's not just with Kevin Warren, and it's not just with how, I think it's more with how these other presidents voted. And do we, as an Ohio State football program with as high expectations that we have, want to continue to play in a conference where the majority of the schools do not prioritize success? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying the COVID virus, and I understand there's risks involved. But you mean to tell me that with as much budget and as much money is coming into these schools, that these universities couldn't bubble these kids? Because they already get tutors to start, and they're not necessarily going to every single class in person. You mean to tell me that these kids wouldn't have full access to testing on a regular basis, which they're not going to get when they're outside of the football, group, or outside of the university? I heard the other day there's several college football games that actually had to be postponed. One of them, I think, with Louisiana Tech, because they had the hurricane and a lot of those students had to go home. And guess what? They came back and a lot of them had the virus because they were not in a contained quarters where, it could be regulated. And that's Louisiana Tech. Like, if you're at Ohio State, and that's one of their biggest arguments, is that they have all these safe regulations in place to where they can do these testings. They can do a bubble, so to speak, or a modified bubble. They have access to everything they could possibly need to keep these kids as safe as possible. And then don't get me started with all of this myocarditis stuff, because if you know someone's tested positive, then test them for myocarditis once they've recovered. And if they test negative, then they're good. If they test that they do have heart muscle inflammation, then don't play them, don't practice them, and give them antibiotics, because that's the way that you treat myocarditis. Like, it's mind-boggling to me, the fear-mongering that's going into all of this, that is trying to scare people off from saying, well, football's nowhere near as important as people's lives. I get that. I understand people's lives are important. I'm not downplaying that. But you're also ruining so many more things in a process, while this is actually one of the safest places for them to be in the first place.
Another thing that kills me is that people are talking about, lives are more important than football. I personally don't feel that way about it, and I'm not saying that anybody who feels any other way is wrong. I'm just saying personally, from the data that I've seen, I really just don't feel that way. Not to mention I've had, several people that have had. I just feel like there is, without a doubt, 100% a safe way to go about this for both the fans and the athletes playing. And I really think that the Big Ten at the end of the day jumped the gun. They thought they were going to be a trendsetter and close this thing down first, and everybody was going to fall in line. Then they realized halfway in they made a mistake. And now I think they're just too prideful, so they're dragging it out. You're supposed to be the face of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren. So get out here and be the face. Don't write a letter like a coward. And I really think that's where all my frustration really stems from. And, because of that, I would say that my opinion on whether or not Ohio State should leave the Big Ten, go independent, is slightly swayed. It's swayed because of this. If you'd have asked me 3 months ago if I thought we should leave the Big Ten, I'd have said no. But you asked me today, and I'm pissed off. Tell you what, dude, I'm starting to lean the other way.
Yeah, and I mean, we can't overstate the fact that this is an election year, and I think you'd have to be living under a rock to assume that there is nothing political in any of this either.
And I'm not going to turn this into some kind of a, what I believe versus what everyone else believes thing, but
well,
I will say this.
Listen,
I do what I want. No,
well, that's right, because you have the microphone and we don't, so you're going to have to listen every word we have to say, right?
That's right. It doesn't have a wire, but I can throw it. But
mine does have a wire, and that's probably why I sound like crap in this one.
I mean, there's been power moves made in this thing politically, from both sides, and it's clear as day. but I think they need to focus on the student athlete, the experience, and what they're taking away from these young men.
Well, let me ask you this, Chad. So we know the poll numbers, of course, and that's what other people think, but where do you lie? And I'm saying, like, if you had three options, would you stay in the Big Ten? And I'm saying, honestly, I know that you're very reactive right now and angry and frustrated with the conference, but, logically speaking, as much as you possibly can, would you stay in the Big Ten conference? Would you leave and join another conference? Or would you think going independent would be our best option?
I have to be honest, the roles have switched for me. A couple of months ago, I never would have thought about leaving the Big Ten. The Michigan rivalry, is something that I hold dear to my heart, and everybody does that's from, our town.
But you don't need to be in the Big Ten to have a Michigan rivalry.
And you're right. You're right about that. And that's the thing that's even the little piece right now that's holding me to the Big Ten. But I have to be honest, I have swayed the other way. And although I would love to, you and I have had many conversations about this. I would love to see how the Buckeyes do in the Big 12 or the SEC, really, either one. Those would be my choice for conferences if we had to go somewhere else.
Gosh,
but
the
at the
Big
end
12
of the day,
would be a joke, in my opinion. But
I would love it, dude. I love the traditional powerhouses in Oklahoma and Texas. I love that. I would love to be there. At the same point in time, it makes me think that I think Ohio State could stand on its own as an independent. And honestly, that would probably be my choice.
Even as we sit here right now, I don't even know if I've definitively kind of made a decision what I honestly think they should do, because I have, like, I'm more of a numbers person. I really am. I kind of like to see that stuff in front of me. Sure, I can be, a little bit reactive based upon my emotions, and kind of immediate to decide. But at the end of the day, if something like that, like, I really try to see all sides of it. And staying in the Big Ten, there's a part of me that there is that tradition with the Big Ten. And then you're kind of throwing away some of that 3 yards in a cloud of dust from the Woody Hayes era. And you're not throwing away, but, it might discredit some of that stuff. Or maybe that's just set in stone as just the history and we kind of move from there. I don't know, but it's just, it would be, could you honestly sit there and just like fathom like Ohio State in the SEC, or Ohio State in the Big 12, or Ohio State in the ACC, which that would be my last choice. But you see where I'm coming from. Like, it seems almost like so disconjointed. It doesn't even seem like my brain can't fathom that. But at the same time,
but you know what? You think about Nebraska. Think about Nebraska fans.
Yeah, and they were national champions in the Big 12.
Exactly.
Like, when has there ever been a national champion in any football related, in any football power conference that has switched conferences? I can't remember back when it was the Big East and the ACC, and there was kind of a mixture there. I don't know if Miami wasn't always ACC, were they? Miami, Florida. I'm pretty sure Miami, Florida was like maybe Big East there for a while.
May have been. I'd have to look that up.
I'm pretty sure. Like, to see, that's, because when we grew up watching, I mean, for the most part, especially since I really started paying attention to it, your ACC was comprised of what it is now. But I do recall, it wasn't always like Florida State and Miami and Virginia Tech, and like that wasn't always just your traditional ACC. There was also kind of some Big East teams that were mixed in there. But I understand the point you're making. Changes happen sometimes. And even though it's hard to see it now, and especially with it being arguably the best team in the conference for past decade plus, and maybe if ever, okay? So there'd be the equivalent of saying Alabama's going to leave the SEC, or the equivalent of Texas/Oklahoma leaving the Big 12, or even the equivalent of Clemson, which is recent, or maybe like a Florida State, something like that, leaving the ACC. Like, that's big time. You know what I mean? And that's, I think maybe that's probably the hardest thing to fathom. It'd be one thing if you're a team in the Big Ten and you branch off and join another one and go independent, but it's another thing if you've been the top team in that conference, if you've been like the face of that conference for decades, and then you decide to leave, because that will almost lead into our next point that we both, and we've talked off to the side, but I think we both easily believe that Ohio State makes the Big Ten.
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. Because if you think about it, I mean, there's other teams that contribute. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Ohio State's, the end all be all of everything. But I mean, think about it. Michigan has been in the toilet for how long now? I mean, a long time. Although they do.
At least 10 years. At least 10 years.
Oh
Now,
yeah,
given
yeah,
that last time
and
they won a title was back in the 1990s, but I
right.
mean, it's not even been a rivalry in the last decade.
No, and I mean, I know that they make a lot of money. There's a lot of Michigan fans out there, a lot of them. But you know what? I just think as far as competition and competing on another level, conference to conference, it's Ohio State all day. It's not even a question.
Right. No, I'm with you on a lot of this, and if you're, I guess, gun to my head, if you're going to make me make a decision, I'll be honest, I would rather see Ohio State go independent, and I think my reasoning for that is I know how much money Ohio State is going to bring in each year, and it's not just they got over 100,000 seats, and you got to assume they got at least 6 home games a year. That's 600,000 tickets at varying different prices. Trust me, I've paid some prices for crappy seats, and they're still pricey. So I know they're bringing in a lot of money. They just started selling alcohol several years ago. Not to mention the licensing they have on all of the Ohio State brand in general that they're bringing money in from. Like
Yeah.
Ohio State is one of the 2-3 programs in the country that could survive on its own. Notre Dame 1, Ohio State 2, and I would toss it up between an Alabama and a Texas on the other ones. They can survive on their own. I mean, hell, Texas has their Longhorn network where they have their own, subscription network to watch Texas games because they're that big of an alumni fan base and a big of a brand that they can do that. Why couldn't Ohio State have a Buckeye network? Where
We
you want to branch
absolutely
off from the
could.
Big Ten and you want to branch off from the Big Ten network and all that stuff. Of course, I can guarantee you right now they're going to have 1 million subscribers in no time for some sort of service, like you said, that maybe they'll put it on Hulu or something like. And nowadays, it doesn't even have to be something that cable can provide because half the people have Fire Sticks and smart TVs where I could stream something from some sort of service. So, I really believe Ohio State could stand on its own. And they're not going to have to divvy up all of the TV money and all of the other revenue they bring in, which is, kind of what you have to do in the Big Ten, where everything's supposed to be divided evenly amongst all 14 schools, where we know every school is not equal.
And it just went to show, in the voting and the results that came out. Maryland, schools like Maryland and Rutgers, they don't care about playing football this year because they have no chance to win anything. I mean, they play because it's a Big Ten school, because, it's part of their school's tradition. They know they're not winning the national championship this year. So for them, they're like, why risk it? But that's a disservice to Ohio State. And part of me almost feels like, I hate to sound like such an Ohio State homer, which I am, but
well, duh.
welcome
to the podcast. This is called
yeah,
Dotting
no
the I,
kid.
not hey, we're gonna pat everybody else on the back podcast.
It kind of feels like it feels personal to me. It feels like they're doing Ohio State a disservice.
Well, you don't have to be so politically correct. You could tell everyone how you really feel.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the things that I feel start with the letter F.
Well, like how the Big Ten universities are not friends anymore.
Yeah,
Maybe they're
something
more
like that.
foes.
But at the end of the day, man, I really think a lot of this comes down to money.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people understand that, there's contracts, right? Especially big TV contracts. I don't remember what year it started. I think it was probably back, 2016, 17, somewhere in that range, where Big Ten, and had to deal with Fox Sports. And this is like this big $250 million TV contract per year. And initially, it was supposed to like divide up money where like every team in the Big Ten was going to get like almost $18 million a year. Well, gosh, I mean, by like 2018, like each of these schools were making over $50 million per school. Like it's literally like what the Big Ten is bringing in TV contract wise is bigger than every other conference. That right there is probably going to be the number one biggest reason why everything we're talking about today, as much as we believe they should leave, whether it's for fandom or for fairness or for right to choose or all this other stuff, is going to keep us locked in more than anything. Because as much as I probably lean more towards leaning, and I feel like a lot of people right now do, I personally don't feel like it's ever going to happen.
It's probably not. But it leads me to my other point. So we all know that the shares in the Big Ten are split, okay? If you're Rutgers and you're getting $50 million a year to play football, you might want to give a little nudge, a little, how you doing, to your big brother up here, the one that's making you $50 million.
Well,
Because
listen,
you know what?
listen, did you watch the NBA playoff game last night with the Lakers against the Rockets? And the Lakers
No, I
won,
did.
and
I did not.
LeBron got like his 162nd playoff win, and it ended up being the most of all time. So guess who he passed as the most all time in playoff wins?
Who's that?
Derek Fisher.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
Listen, exactly. Now, I'm not saying Derek Fisher's a bad basketball player. He's played in the league for a lot of years, but you know what? That right there would be a Rutgers, living off the coattails of someone else that's going to carry you the whole way. Guess what? They're bringing in so much money because they let the bigger guys do all the damn work. But then when it comes time to vote for the hard stuff and lets you get through this pandemic and let's try to play football, they're like, you know what? I guess I'll just retire. I don't need you. Well, hell, you didn't even do any of the work anyways to build the program. Like, we just brought Rutgers in, like 6 years ago, and they've not won a Big Ten game, or maybe won one? Like, what are you even good for? And the problem is their vote counts just the same as Ohio State's vote.
Exactly. And the worst part is that Michigan's vote counts twice. They got 2 schools there. So when we go to vote, whenever there is a vote, if there's a theoretical vote or whatever is going to happen here, Michigan has 2 votes. And that really sucks because I really feel like there's
will never buy gas in that state. I'm with Woody Hayes, and I will never stop in that state to buy gas. I will die on the side of the road and push it across state lines before I even stop and give that state any money.
My Uncle Glenn, I visited South Bend, Indiana with him when I was a kid. He wanted to take me up and try to convert me into a Notre Dame fan. And he took me up there, and the hotel we stayed in was on the border of Michigan and Indiana. And I called my dad from a payphone that was actually in Michigan, and I was telling him about it, and he hung up on me. I was like, well, that's nice. So I think a lot of people back from that era, you know what I mean, still have that same mentality too.
We're still close enough to that era. I mean, I'm in my mid to late 30s. We're both, 6 months apart. We've been around long enough to where we still remember the teams that were predominantly running teams. It was tradition was a big thing. But people throw that word around like it means something nowadays. Tradition is not what tradition used to be. Now, maybe that's something old people say, like, oh, I remember back in the day when milk used to cost $0.25. Like, I get it. But, dude, tradition is not what it is anymore today because you can't have that same tradition when free agency is such a big thing and money contracts are such a big thing and all this branding and social media and everything's just got to be pow, pow, pow in your face and all the time. Like, I'm sorry, but like tradition just is not what it used to be. So therefore that whole argument of Ohio State, it's tradition, it's Big Ten, like Gene Smith, dude, he's just trying to be politically correct. Like Gene Smith is just a freaking politician. Like half those people, or more than half those people. They're just trying, to save face and say what they think is right, when really, gosh, man, we just wish someone would just say what they mean and mean what they say and actually say something that the people can relate to.
Well, I got to be honest, because, we all know Gene Smith. He's going to be the first one out there to take some credit for something, and he's going to be the first one to pass the buck on something. So, which is why I still hold steady. Right. Right. But the point is, I think they're all being told, shut up, don't say anything. Because I can't see a guy like Gene Smith not coming out and addressing this. He would immediately. I mean, how many scandals, how many situations have we had at Ohio State where we've had to have difficult press conferences to address difficult topics? I mean, holy cow. So I can't see Gene Smith just waiting in the wings like he's been like, I've got nothing to say, The guy always has something to say. So I just think 100% this is being controlled by other things. And this is why everybody's like, well, don't roast Kevin Warren. It's not his fault. He's a representative of the presidents and chancellors. Yeah, but he's also a representative of the Big Ten, the representative of the Big Ten. So if anybody should say something, it should be him, even if it's just...
Don't just throw the term out there like it's for anybody, okay? Even though we may not have gotten a trademark on it, the is still ours.
And I don't know why. The only time I ever use it's for that. No, I'm just kidding. but
would you let the Big Ten? Now, of course, we can't say that because I'm not getting paid 6 figures like Gene Smith, 7 figures or whatever he's getting paid like Gene Smith is. But would you let the Big Ten, as Ohio State, tell you hush, tell you fall in line with what everyone else is doing? And I think actually, if you actually start reading these articles and seeing what these players and these coaches are saying, everyone is actually standing up to the Big Ten with the exception of Gene Smith. Gene Smith is the only one that is actually falling in line. You got Ryan Day, Kerry Combs, Al Washington, all these coaches, these players, everyone, parents, everyone's standing up against the Big Ten saying this is ridiculous. Like, let us play. You're going to sit here and we're getting ready to watch like Clemson and Wake Forest play, but yet we're sitting here at home having to watch this, and you got Gene Smith sitting. That's a whole different story in itself. Now, don't get me wrong. Gene Smith has no say-so whether or not we play, because the vote ultimately comes up to the the chancellor and the president. But you mean to tell me your own athletic director, like, who's to say behind doors he's even standing up for us, or if he's just so politically correct at this point that he's just doing what he thinks is best to keep his own ass clean?
And he's doing a good job of it. I mean, you know how I feel about him, man. And he's been a snake for years. So if anybody knows how to cover their own tracks, it's Gene Smith.
And I think he's doing it now. And I think had he spoken up a little bit more and been more outlandish, like, you know, how Nebraska early on said, hey, you know, we're thinking about playing outside the Big Ten. Big Ten was like, hey, whoa there, little brother. You just got here. You won't play outside the Big Ten, you're not part of our conference, which means you're going to cough up whatever portion you would have got this year. It'll get divvied up amongst the other teams. I guarantee if Ohio State and Gene Smith said the same thing from the get-go, said, listen, this is crap. Like, we're going to go play football. We'll schedule some other teams. You don't want to play as a conference. Great. We won't play for a conference title, but you can't stop us from playing football. I guarantee had Ohio State stepped up and said that, you think that answer would have been the same? Like, okay, fine. Well, see you later. I guess you're not part of the Big Ten. You want to tell me the Big Ten would say that to Ohio State? Like, good luck.
No way.
So, maybe this whole problem is Gene Smith from the get-go was just, you know, so like trying to be politically correct and said, hey, well, you know, we're just not going to argue this thing. We're just going to go along with what they say because it's what they say. And you put someone there with some backbone that says, you know, hold up a second. We're gonna go play some football. You're either in with us or you're out with us.
I would love to see it. It's never going to happen because there's just too much, you know.
Well, he can't
in those
live
higher
forever.
echelon jobs.
He can't live forever, can
he? I disagree. It seems like he can.
He's going to be like the Crypt Keeper at one point. We're going to be looking at like. Gene Smith is going to be like Tales from the athletic department.
Well, I ask you this question. Do you think they're going to vote this weekend?
Man, I was expecting a vote last weekend. I was expecting a vote on Monday. I've been looking at my phone. My battery won't stay charged because I keep trying to look at Twitter, see if anyone has like some sort of leak or something. Man, I don't know. I don't even know if this is like, dude, we had a conversation the other day where I said this is like hanging a carrot in front of a donkey's face. Like, we're going to keep chasing this carrot. Like, what's the point of even actually giving us any information? If you keep us holding on, waiting with the hope of a decision, then you keep a lot of people holding on and you're kind of keeping some of the backlash a little bit away from you. The second you make that definitive decision, they'll crucify you. And I think ultimately that's kind of my feeling on what's happening is I think they keep prolonging this because they know they're not going to have the numbers to okay it. And I think that they are going to have an utter meltdown when these other teams, and I'm talking the Power Five, finally start playing, and then our vote comes out that says, hey, we couldn't get enough. We decided to just not do it until at least the spring. So that's what I feel is going to happen. I feel like the vote may come early next week or this weekend. Frankly, at this point, it could come another month from now. I know that Ohio State's been preparing to play this whole time. They've had voluntary workouts and everyone's showing up. You know, Ohio State is preparing as if they can play in early October. So it's not whether or not we'll be prepared, but at the end of the day, I have a horrible feeling that this is just not going to go our way.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel this way. If they don't vote or whatever, whether they vote or don't vote, or once again, Kevin Warren just tells them what's going to happen, something has got to come out next week. If it doesn't come out next week, I mean, first of all, I'm still holding on to some sliver of a tiny piece of hope that we're going to play in October and we're going to be CFP eligible, but I know that that's probably not going to happen. I think if something doesn't come out the first part of next week, I think we're really, really in the danger zone of just not being able to do that, even if they did okay. I mean, there's still things to be, you know, they're talking about the medical side of things. They're talking about being able to safely do this and presenting a plan to, you know, to the Big Ten, to the chancellors and presidents that they okay, as far as, you know, like some kind of a plan to deal with COVID-19 and play college football. But I'm also talking about scheduling and logistics, and some people are having kids working out. Some people aren't. You know, that all has to be, you know, has to be fixed, and people have to be brought in, and we got to get on the same page so we can get the season rolling. And I just think any more time than really this weekend or a little bit after, man. And you're really rolling the dice on playing.
Right. And I agree. I mean, I'm saying Ohio State's being prepared because they're an elite program and they know what they want in front of them. And they know that if there's even any chance to play, they're going to keep practicing as if they're playing tomorrow. But of course, you got these other programs that may not even have met, may have voluntary workouts that maybe half, if not less than half, kids are showing up. So that's going to have to be taken into account, which even further proves my point that these, lower skill, lower football teams in a conference that have an equal vote as Ohio State are continuing to affect what Ohio State can do with their program, with the team we have this year, with the team we might even have any year. Frankly, I'm sick of it. If it were up to me, I say I vote independent. We make our own schedule. We schedule whoever the hell we want, when and wherever we want, and everything that comes in revenue-wise is all ours. And you know what? We keep that up, we're going to have a 200,000 capacity stadium within 10 years.
I think hopefully they're going to vote next week for Big Ten Nation and for my sanity. I hope they vote next week. Make sure in the meantime, everybody out there, stop by our Facebook page, stop by our Twitter page, stop by YouTube, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a share, give us whatever you want. But just take a listen. And we look forward to talking to you guys next week. Hopefully a decision's made. And until then, see you next week.
See you later, Buckeye Nation. Go Bucks. OH.